In Kentucky's rolling hills, Jim Beam is more than a bourbon. It's a legacy, woven into the very fabric of the bluegrass state. For locals, it's a source of pride, a name that conjures memories of family gatherings, celebrations, and the unmistakable aroma of aging whiskey drifting through the air. Crafted by the Beam family for over 2 centuries, this iconic spirit has been passed down like a cherished heirloom, with each generation adding its own chapter to the story. The Clermont Distillery is the heart of this tradition, where generations have turned corn, rye, and barley into a world-renowned spirit. Here, the process is both science and art, a careful balance of time-honored methods and subtle innovation. Jim Beam's resilience is legendary, surviving prohibition, wars, and economic downturns, always keeping the bourbon flowing. Even when the world changed, the Beam family found ways to adapt, ensuring their whiskey would endure. The iconic white label and red logo are symbols of quality, making Jim Beam a global phenomenon. From small-town bars to international airports, its presence is unmistakable, a taste of Kentucky wherever you are. The distillery is a pilgrimage site for whiskey lovers, a key stop on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. Visitors come from around the world to walk the grounds, breathe in the sweet scent of mash, and witness history in motion. Bourbon making here is a patient art, a secret mash bill, proprietary yeast, and the careful hands of master distillers who treat every batch as a work of devotion. Years of aging in charred oak barrels transform clear spirit into liquid gold, each barrel developing its own unique character as it rests in the Kentucky climate. Every decision echoes years into the future, tying the community's rhythm to the distilleries. The people who work here aren't just employees, they're stewards of a tradition, and their livelihoods are deeply connected to every bottle that leaves the warehouse. Rickhouses dot the landscape, holding millions of barrels, a liquid treasure aging in silence. These warehouses are more than storage, they're monuments to patience, each one holding the promise of future celebrations. The distillery has provided stability and pride for generations of local families. It's a place where fathers and mothers have worked alongside sons and daughters, passing down not just skills, but a sense of belonging. That's why the recent announcement from Jim Beam has sent shockwaves through Kentucky and the spirits world. The news has left many wondering what the future holds for this beloved institution. The heart of American whiskey is about to go quiet. Machines that once hummed with activity now stand still, and the familiar sounds of production have faded to silence. And for the first time in living memory, the future feels uncertain. The pause is more than a business decision. It's a moment that touches everyone who has ever raised a glass of Jim Beam and all who call Kentucky home. In late 2025, Suntory Global Spirits, the parent company of Jim Beam, shocked the whiskey world with a stunning announcement that rippled through the industry and beyond. For the entirety of 2026, all whiskey production at the historic Clermont Distillery would come to a complete halt. The news sent shockwaves through Kentucky and the global bourbon community, as the distillery's machines and workers prepared for an unprecedented pause. The copper stills, which have defined the region's spirit for generations, would fall silent. For the first time in living memory, the heart of Kentucky bourbon would stop beating, a move no one, not even industry insiders, saw coming. Clermont is responsible for nearly a third of Jim Beam's bourbon output, so this pause means a massive volume will be missing from the supply chain. The impact is not just local, but global, as bourbon lovers and distributors everywhere brace for the consequences. According to Suntory, the shutdown is a strategic move, an opportunity to upgrade the site, modernize equipment, and better align production with shifting consumer demand. The company insists this is an investment in the future, not a retreat. Yet, a year-long shutdown of this scale is unheard of in Kentucky's bourbon history. The announcement has raised deep concerns among the 1,500 employees who depend on the distillery, as well as the small-town community that has grown around it for generations. While Suntory promised there would be no layoffs, anxiety and uncertainty spread quickly among workers and their families, who now face a year of waiting and wondering what the future holds. Around the world, distributors, retailers, and bourbon fans are already worried about looming shortages and inevitable price hikes. The ripple effects of this decision could be felt for years, as supply tightens and demand remains high. The bourbon boom, once thought unstoppable, now faces its greatest challenge yet: a test of resilience for an industry built on patience, tradition, and the spirit of Kentucky. Jim Beam's pause is the result of a perfect storm: economic pressures, shifting markets, and a rapidly changing landscape for Kentucky bourbon. What once seemed like an unstoppable boom has now hit a wall, forcing even the biggest names to rethink their strategies. After years of explosive growth, Kentucky's $9 billion bourbon industry is now facing a major downturn. The state, long celebrated as the heart of American whiskey, is suddenly grappling with challenges it hasn't seen in decades. Distillers ramped up production to meet what seemed like insatiable demand, but now that demand has slowed dramatically. The result? A record 16 million barrels are aging in Kentucky warehouses, triple the amount from just 15 years ago, and far more than the market can absorb. This massive surplus comes at a steep price. Annual barrel taxes are set to soar to $75 million in 2025, putting even more pressure on distilleries already struggling to balance their books. Meanwhile, alcohol sales have dropped 5% across the board. Bars and tasting rooms that once bustled with tourists and locals alike are now seeing fewer customers, and shelves that used to empty quickly are staying full. In response, distillers have slashed production by 28% statewide, a drastic measure that underscores just how serious the situation has become. Workers who once kept the stills running day and night now face uncertainty about the future. Jim Beam's shutdown is the most visible sign of the crisis, a bold and public move to stop adding to the surplus and try to rebalance the books. The world's best-known bourbon brand is taking a stand, hoping to set an example for the rest of the industry. The company will use the downtime for much-needed upgrades and maintenance, but make no mistake, the real motivation is economic survival. It's a calculated risk, one that could determine the future of the brand. By pausing now, Jim Beam hopes to weather the storm and prepare for a more sustainable future. The company is betting that by tightening its belt today, it can emerge stronger when the market eventually rebounds. The bourbon industry's gold rush has ended. Now comes the reckoning. For Kentucky distillers, the next chapter will be about adaptation, resilience, and finding a new path forward in a world that's no longer thirsty for endless growth. Jim Beam's decision is just the tip of the iceberg. Across the industry, giants like Brown-Forman and Diageo have cut jobs and paused production. Brown-Forman laid off 650 employees, 12% of its workforce, while Diageo halted distillation at George Dickel. MGP Ingredients, a major contract distiller, saw sales drop 19%. The rapid expansion of the past 2 decades has given way to contraction and tough choices. Overproduction and falling demand are forcing even the biggest brands to scale back. The bourbon industry is grappling with the consequences of its own success. Much of bourbon's current crisis stems from international trade disputes. Retaliatory tariffs, first imposed during the Trump administration, hit American whiskey hard. Canada, once a top export market, banned U.S. spirits in 2025, causing sales to plummet by 85%. The European Union threatened a 50% tariff, making American bourbon nearly unaffordable overseas. These trade wars have devastated exports, with U.S. spirits sales abroad dropping 9% in just 1 quarter. Industry leaders warn that without tariff-free trade, the future is bleak. The surplus of aging bourbon is a direct result of these broken export promises. Companies like Jim Beam are left with warehouses full of whiskey and shrinking markets. Trade policy has become a make-or-break issue for Kentucky bourbon. Despite the production pause, the Clermont campus isn't shutting down entirely. The visitor center and acclaimed restaurant will stay open, keeping the brand's public face vibrant and tourism alive. Bottling and warehousing operations continue, ensuring Jim Beam remains on store shelves. Managing millions of aging barrels is a year-round job, supporting local employment. Other Jim Beam distilleries, like Booker Noe and the craft facility at Clermont, will keep producing whiskey. The company is reducing output, not stopping entirely. This targeted pause allows Jim Beam to adapt without abandoning its roots. The heart of the brand, and its connection to Kentucky, remains intact. For now, the legacy endures, even as the stills go silent. The community holds its breath, waiting for the next chapter. The news hit Kentucky hard. For Clermont residents, the distillery is more than a workplace. It's a source of pride and identity. Locals worry about job security and the ripple effect on small businesses. Whiskey fans voiced disappointment, blaming economic and political forces, especially tariffs, for the industry's troubles. Industry leaders renewed calls for stable, tariff-free trade, calling the pause a consequence of failed policy. Workers face uncertainty, even as the company avoids layoffs for now. Generations saw beam jobs as lifelong careers. Now, that certainty is shaken. The community is left to confront an unpredictable future. The steady rhythm of bourbon production has been disrupted, and everyone feels the change. The Jim Beam pause quickly became a political flashpoint. Many blamed the Trump-era tariffs, arguing they backfired and hurt Kentucky's signature industry. Politicians like Amy McGrath were blunt. Trump's tariffs hurt Kentucky. Online, bourbon fans echoed this frustration, seeing the pause as a preventable tragedy. Others argued the downturn was due to overproduction and broader economic trends, not just trade policy. The debate rages on, but the impact is real. Jobs and livelihoods are at stake. The Jim Beam pause is now a symbol in the fight over trade, tariffs, and American industry. The future of bourbon is caught in the crossfire. The year-long pause at Clermont is a turning point for Kentucky bourbon. The industry must now manage its vast inventory and let demand catch up. For consumers, there's no immediate shortage, but future supply gaps and higher prices are likely. Restoring free trade is critical for long-term recovery. Industry leaders are lobbying to resolve tariff disputes and reopen export markets. Without global sales, growth will remain limited. The Jim Beam pause is a painful but necessary adaptation. The resilience of the Beam family and Kentucky's bourbon tradition is being tested. The hope is that this pause is just a breath, before the stills roar back to life and a new chapter begins.